Started. Hello, everyone. This is Jeff Martin with Magic City Books here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so happy to be here. This has been a strange season to be a human being, and I've had, not much to look forward to, but this has been something I've been looking forward to for many, many months. And while I'm sorry we weren't able to do this event in person, it's good to be alive at a time when we have other options available to us. This would not be the same if we were doing it, even over Skype, having something like Zoom at hand, it really makes the difference. So I'm not going to give you guys too much in the way of introduction in terms of what's coming up. If you guys want to see more events coming up, go to magiccitybooks.com. We've got all kinds of fun things underway, but I want to get to the task at hand. If you are here tonight, you have a copy of Mr. Know-It-All by John Waters. And if you have that book, you know his work. And I don't use the words the national treasure lightly when I say he is that, but I've been a fan of John's work since I was a little kid. I went and saw Hairspray in the theater when I was 8 years old. And it was, kind of the gateway drug for me for all things John Waters. And I went back and I kept going. And I was just saying I have a copy of his wonderful book, Crackpot, which came out in the 1980s. And I've just been a fan of his written work, his films, and just everything that he's been doing. So it's a huge honor. And I want to say a big, big welcome to John Waters. Thank you, John, for joining us tonight.
Thank you. And I've seen all the different events you've had. So you've had quite a career yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. So I guess we will begin by saying, if you guys have questions, please put those in the Q&A and I will try to incorporate those as we go. And as I mentioned, you guys have a copy of the book, and John was kind enough to sign book plates for all those books as well. And if you need additional ones, we're going to post some links in the chat here so you can do that. So check the chat and pick up some more books for gifts for yourself or anybody else. What have you been up to in quarantine, John Waters? How are you handling this weird world we're living in?
Been doing what everybody else is doing, being bored and being crazy, but I'm a writer, so that hasn't changed. Every morning I get up and write. I've been in 3 holding cells, Baltimore for 2 months, then Provincetown in the summer where I've lived for 56 summers, and now in San Francisco where I have an apartment. So I don't go anywhere except the store, really. I guess I've graduated to going to a few restaurants that have outdoor seating, but I only have to have my special table that's the furthest away from everybody. And one restaurant in Provincetown, the table's so far away that the waiter forgets it there and they never come. But I like that table. So, I've been reading, I've been watching television, something I never did. And being bored and mad that this is happening, because I'm so glad I'm old, because if I was young and like I told all these chapters like in Mr. Know-It-All about getting these films finally through the studio system and then have this happen to interrupt your show business career, I'd be really nuts.
Well, in a time when going to the grocery store is such a luxury, which of those 3 cities has the best store option? What's your best store, since that's become?
Oh, easy. Eddie's in Baltimore, the best grocery store. If they know you well enough, not only will they deliver it, they'll put it away. They know where it goes in your house. And I did see something funny. They had the thing where you wait outside, 6 feet apart with an X, to get in. They only let 6 people in because it's not that big a supermarket. So somebody sent me something that was on Facebook or Instagram. There was somebody standing behind me in line of my shoes saying, I'm standing behind John Waters in line to get in the supermarket. Well, that was a Baltimore moment, definitely. But yes, definitely Baltimore, Eddie's. It's still a great store. And I always see Ann Tyler in there. She goes there, who's my friend. And so all the literary types in Baltimore go to Eddie's.
I would go to a grocery store that is frequented by Ann Tyler and John Waters, that's for sure.
Ann's great, and her book is so great. She got nominated for the Booker Prize, with all these young authors. So I'm a fan of Ann, certainly.
Yeah,
she very much describes Baltimore in a way completely different than me, that is completely also very realistic. And Ann and I are friends, and we agree on nothing. We have the complete opposite taste in everything.
And I love that, she's been such a mystery to readers. She doesn't really do any press or anything. And so it's been nice. I think sometimes we know too much about some writers but for her, you kind of just, obviously you know her, but for me, she kind of just lives on the page,
My favorite thing is when she won the Pulitzer, one of them, she actually went she doesn't give interviews, so the Baltimore Sun knocked on her door and she answered and said, "Excuse me, I'm in the middle of writing a sentence." Which is such a good line.
I love Ann Tyler. So you mentioned you've been watching TV, which is something you never do. I'm curious to know, like, have you kind of become obsessed with any certain shows, or what's keeping you interested? Or I guess
Well,
one would assume it would be kind of schlocky reality television, maybe. But
no, I hate reality shows, except I did like the Tiger King. If I heard about it now, I wouldn't, because everyone likes it. But I watched it from the beginning, and it looked like Pink Flamingos to me. It seemed like all the characters were straight out of that. The guy looked like David Lockery to me. So, and I thought all his boyfriends were cute. And people said, "Oh, God, John, I thought they were cute." And now they have teeth. I don't know. I like them better without teeth. And I'm all hoping they all do porn.
well, that hits a little too close to home. I've actually been to that animal park. It's not too far from here in Oklahoma, so it's a strange place.
Well, I like the idea that it was made to be an anti, wild animal collectors thing. That's how it started off, really.
Yeah.
And it is. I mean, all of them are creepy. Every person in every one of those zoos, those animals shouldn't be in there. I think zoos are scary. You go to them, it's so depressing, I think. Although maybe it's the only way, if you love animals, you get to see animals. I don't know. I'm torn on that question. But every one of those places looks scary to me for animals.
And I guess we should get you on the record as to saying what you think happened to Carol Baskin's husband. Yeah, she killed him, right?
I think she's going to kill the next one too, maybe, because he's so doting on her. You know what I mean? I don't know what happened. I know Eric, who made the movie. I knew forever. He ran lots of hip clubs in New York. He ran Area. All these clubs. He still owns clubs. And he wrote me an email saying, "Oh, watch it." I thought he just meant as a friend, and then I watched. I thought, "You made it? I never even knew that." So, good for him, because talk about a hit. It was a hit. I caught up on things I had never seen, like Chernobyl, which I really, really liked. I watched, let me see, what did I watch? David Simon. I always watch whatever he has out. I watched a couple weird old ones like Mommy, Dearest, and Dead, which is really a scary one. Or the one about those two girls that believed the video game was real and killed people because, I watched some true crime ones. So, but then I like to go back to reading, obscure books. I love university press books that don't even have covers, that cost $100 for the hardback. Like my favorite new one is Understanding John Recchi. How many copies did that sell?
You have famously have a pretty amazing personal library. Is that something that just formed organically because you love and read tons of books, or is that something you've kind of personally tried to curate a collection over time?
I think it's both. I didn't purposely just buy a book because I have read every book. I mean, I have sections to read, which is 400 books, but I have 10,000 books at least. So I like to read. That's all. It's the only way I relax. Television doesn't really relax me. Sometimes it gets me nervous. It's like a piece of a machinery talking to me. So I never understand people that leave the TV on all the time in their house. That would make me crazy. But if I have learned to watch it, yes, just this last year.
We were talking about your writing career in terms of books, not just films, but it's been 40 years since your first book came out. But over these last, say, 10 years, you've been quite prolific with books, and obviously you haven't had a film since A Dirty Shame.
Right.
Is that something where it's been harder to get films made, and you wanted to do books? Like, you seemed like you've kind of put one focus over the other.
Well, I think books have always been as important to me as movies. You can't make a movie and write a book at the same time. I've been paid to write 3 different movies that never got made. Fruitcake That May Get Made, which is a children's Christmas adventure, and 2 or 3 different versions of Hairspray. One is a TV series, one is a revival, everything. And they paid me. It was Hollywood. I did it the whole way, but they didn't get made. So that's fair. That's how Hollywood works. But I've still been involved in Hollywood. But if I don't make another movie, I'm okay. I've made 17 movies, but I'm still pitching movies. I had a pitch meeting this week. So it's not like I'm out of it, but to me, even if I continued to make movies all the time, I would write books because I love doing that. I get up and write something Monday to Friday every day. It might be a book, it might be a script, but I always am working on one project, and I'm working on a novel now because when Mr. Know-It-All came out, I signed a 2-book deal with FSG, and the other one was for a novel called Liar Mouth about a woman that steals suitcases at airports.
You know, you've written, especially Mr. Know-It-All and other books, about the challenges of getting a film made, the tenacity you've had to have to get that done, especially in the early days, and not even, I mean, even actually as of late, you know, it's just a
The
constant
later
struggle.
days were
Yeah.
harder than the earlier days. The early days, I just had to find one pot dealer or one lunatic that would lend me money. Now I have to go in and talk people into thinking that this is going to appeal to everybody in the whole world. And it's a movie called A Dirty Shame about sex addicts. So I learned how to negotiate through the Hollywood system. I learned how to get through test screenings. I learned how to do rewrites. I learned how to negotiate my way through it. And that's what this book is about. It is, you do have to negotiate, learn how to do it in whatever field in the arts you're in. If you want a book, yeah, you have to read other books. You have to think up, you have to know how to write a treatment to get your deal. And I think it's important to share that, right? So somehow I've gotten away with this for 50 years.
I wonder, you know, you read so widely, and do you keep up with contemporary film as much? I was thinking so much about you when I was watching the film, The Florida Project, and the filmmaker Sean Baker. And
Yeah, we became friends because I interview him every year at the Provincetown Film Festival. Of course, that was postponed this year too. We have a Filmmaker on the Edge award, and I interview that person every year, and he was it one year, and he was really funny and really nice, and I love that movie. I like all his movies. I think he's really, really, and he must be working on something new because we haven't heard anything since that movie. So
yeah,
I'm dying to see what comes next.
I was thinking, you know, with Tangerine, the film that came before that, which famously cost very little, or if, you know, hardly anything, was shot on iPhones and whatnot. That spirit very much seems like what you were capturing, you know, in your early career. Do people kind of look to you and ask you how you did it? Do you get a lot of calls for advice?
Worse than that is when you're pitching a Hollywood movie and they say, well, you made a movie on $15,000. Why do you need this? Well, because I was 17 and it was filmed with my friends in the woods. But, you know, I can't go to movie stars and say, well, you work for nothing. I've only made 17 movies. It's a different time now. And I don't want to go backwards. I don't want to try to do that. Then that's a different time. That's how everybody starts out, you know, but once you started out, you can't call in favors forever. You have to pay people, and they should be paid. And those early movies, the core people that were behind it, still get money from those movies. They got a percentage of it. So, and they're dead. I sent it to their brothers, their families, and believe me, some of their families are amazed that they get money from a movie that their family was very ashamed of when it first came out.
You know, you talk pretty candidly about money and finance, and you've always been very open about that component of it. And I think people do wonder, was the Broadway adaptation of Hairspray the most lucrative thing you were ever involved with?
Completely. I made the most money on that than anything in my life. And I can thank Margot Lyon, who recently died, for that, because she trusted my vision. She wanted my vision involved. And Mark and Scott and all the people that wrote the music and the book and everything. It was a world I didn't know, Broadway. I learned everything about it. I was around through the whole process, kind of like a studio executive. I gave notes. I was there right from the beginning. I went to every town tryout, and it was an absolutely wonderful experience. And I remember the night being on stage when it won the Tony. How did this ever happen? You know, and then they did Crybaby, and I think completely different people did Crybaby. I think they did a great job. I was really a fan of it, but it failed on Broadway, even though we had 4 of the top Tony nominations. We came in 5th, I'm sure. But I think it didn't work because it was the sexiest Broadway musical for the whole family, which is a problem.
Yeah. You know, you look at the Broadway shows that are getting made now, and there's so many that are based on films, that are adapted from films, and there's not as many.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was. Yes, my point was, this seemed to have started a trend. But do you see any negative side to the fact that there's not as much original musicals coming, not as many
Yeah,
original musicals coming out?
because it was not a jukebox musical. You know, Hairspray, all the music in it was original Broadway music. It reminded you of songs you knew, and it was based on a knowledge of rhythm and blues and that kind of music. But it was none of those songs were known before it came out. That's the difference of going to see a jukebox musical. And some of them are done well, but to me, that's a whole different thing. If you wrote new music that reflected that time or whatever it is. But now, the ones that work are the ones that don't just repeat the same thing again, you know. And Hairspray didn't repeat it. It changed the plot. And then when they made the movie out of it with John Travolta, it was the opposite. It was a big budget Hollywood movie and everything, but they changed it again. You have to change it each time for it to work. Once you do the same thing again, it stops.
And is that something that you kept in mind? Even you said you were maybe working on a television version of that. Would that change also? And that, does that keep
Oh,
continuing?
did it change? You know, I had it. One of them. All the plots are in Mr. Know-It-All, so you can find out every plot. I mean, one of them was way later, where Link tried to be like the Beatles, and he had pimples under his bangs, who sang to him and everything. I had hairdo miracles in it. Oh God, yeah. I had completely insane different versions of it. Yes, where little Inez became a Black Panther. Oh yeah, it was. It moved on to many directions.
You know, when we have a question here about Divine, and the question was, you know, did Divine ever scare you while filming, meaning, or make you worry you were going to get arrested or anything like that? Did
No,
anything
Divine never scared me. Divine and I teamed up to scare others, scare hippies. Really, that's what our job was, to scare hippies. Um, Getting arrested, yeah, we all had been arrested anyway. I wasn't scared. Being arrested was part of it. I mean, when Mondo Trasho, the police raided it, and Divine escaped in full drag Sunday morning, driving a 1959 Cadillac Eldorado with the top down, with a nude man in the car, and the police couldn't find him. So, you know, what's that? Being arrested, Divine went to prison a couple, but Divine was a shoplifter. I mean, we all in those days going to jail, none of us got sentenced. None of us did time or anything. We were privileged white kids. Our parents got us out of jail, you know. So looking back on it, it was almost nostalgic. I remember when we got arrested for Mondo Trasher for conspiracy to commit indecent exposure. I never knew there was such a charge. I don't think there ever was afterwards. But David Lockery was in the little cell up the street, and in our little neighborhood jail, and he made me a paper fan out of a gum wrapper and passed it to me. And when we made Crybaby, we shot in that same courtroom, and I showed Patty Hearst the only jail cell I had been in.
you know, the last film you did with Divine, I think, was Hairspray, and Divine passed away in 1988. And you had done so many projects before that. Do you view that moment when Divine passed away as kind of like your career up to that point? Do you think your career would have gone a different way if you had kept collaborating for the next couple of decades beyond?
Maybe not. I think Divine would have been in Crybaby, and probably would have been the Susan Terrell part. I think when Divine died, I knew that probably I was not going to work with someone in drag again, because I felt like I had done that so much. But so I went with Johnny Depp. It was kind of the opposite, kind of. But my career, I think, the second part of it began with Hairspray, and then it kept going because it was Hollywood. And that's what I have in this book. I tell the story of my climb upwards and my fall down afterwards. And oddly enough, um, you can fail upwards in Hollywood. You know, things go well, and the weird thing is that my films continue to play later and later and keep coming out. Criterion puts them out there on TV now. Every one of my movies has been on TV except Desperate Living. And I thought, who would have ever imagined that Pink Flamingos could play uncut on television anywhere in the world, really? And it has. So you never know what's going to happen. Did I ever think Criterion would put out multiple Maniacs? My God, no. So they continue to play, though, and they continue to be discovered by other young lunatics that join in and join, hopefully, the fun.
That actually is a good follow-up to a question I was going to ask, which was, you know, beyond those kind of, you know, Crybaby, Hairspray, Pink Flamingos, some of those films that a lot of people are familiar with. Is there one that you're kind of surprised has had longer legs than any of the others, that kind of has taken on a new life in some way?
Well, I think Serial Mom's the best movie I ever made, if I had to pick one. And that is, it was not a success when it came out, and it is pretty well now. It plays on TV all the time. I think my personal favorite of the newer ones is Cecil B. Demented, which at the time people didn't like so much, but I think they're changing their opinion on it, and it's being liked a little more these days. And I think it's, I like all my movies. I made them. I thought them up. They're all the same to me. Every one of them to me. I'm never surprised why that one a hit and this one isn't. I'm always amazed by that because each one of them I made to be a commercial movie in a weird way. I wanted them to make money. I wanted them to, because I wanted to continue making movies. If they don't make money, you don't. We're not in France where they give you money to make art films from the government. Can you imagine that in this country, no matter who was president, giving Gaspar Noé money to make Irreversible, which they did and they continue to do. And that's one of the great things about Europe is that they let really insane filmmakers have their vision and don't try to stop it. And that's something that would be impossible to ever imagine in America, because usually those kind of films have been tried to be stopped by the government, not encouraged.
There was a big to-do a week or so ago when a letter came out in the Atlantic that was signed on to by tons of writers and intellectuals, and it was about cancel culture, right? This is a term we hear about all the time. And the argument was that we need to push back on this cancel culture. And this is Margaret Atwood and Salman Rushdie and all these people. Where do you kind of stand on that argument? Do you feel like
it depends which people are getting canceled? And they're old people, like I am. And so I would tend to agree with them. But if I was 20, I probably would not. I said in that commencement speech I gave recently, no matter how cutting edge you are, it dulls a little as you get older. I tried to burn the Bank of America down and my money's in it now. So things do change. However, I understand that these days both sides get on my nerves, to be honest. Sometimes some of the liberal TV to me is as bad as Fox. It's just on the other side. I don't want to know what the newscaster thinks. I don't want to see people cry. I want the news. I just want to hear what it is. I'll make up my own mind. That's why sometimes I love reading the Wall Street Journal editorials, even though I do not agree with them, but they're smart, at least from the other side. So I do like to listen to both sides. I don't want to just have what I believe reinforced over and over and over every day. I have faith in my own opinions. So to me, the cancel culture thing, it is crazy sometimes. And my fear, even though that I probably agree with most of it, not all, but that the people in mid-America, if I roll my eyes even once at some of this political correctness, what are they thinking? They can't say it, but I'm afraid they're going to secretly vote for Trump. That's my fear. We have to pick our battles, and the Democrats are not good at picking our battles. Let's win, then do that other shit.
We have a question about Odorama. We actually have two questions about Odorama. First, can you tell us what Odorama is or was?
Odorama was a card you got when polyester came out, and numbers appeared on the screen and you scratch and sniff that number that went along with the plot. It was basically a tribute to William Castle movies that had gimmicks, and also the Smell-O-Vision movie that first came out that had a big machine in the theater that pumped out smells. The problem was they couldn't get rid of the smells. So after 5 shows, you needed a gas mask. The biggest problem was they always was good smells. I knew that if you put in bad smells, it would work. So that was how we sold the picture. And many different versions of the Odorama card was put out, but Criterion recently released it on a beautiful restored version, and they made a new Odorama card. And leave it to Criterion, it's arty. The smells are more abstract when you smell them. So it's a new version of Odorama, but it's I got the idea because Archer Winston, a critic who is actually pretty forgotten today, said about my films, if you see my name on the marquee, walk on the other side of the street and hold your nose. So that kind of inspired me. Some bad reviews help.
Ed, who's one of our viewers, asks, you're known for stunt casting. You mentioned Patty Hearst a little while ago. Well, who do you consider was your best stunt cast? Well,
I only did stunt casting once, and maybe I helped invent that term, because Patty Hearst I never thought of as stunt casting. because she's been in many of my movies and she was a good actress. I never put anybody in my movies because they were so bad they were good. I thought they were so weird they were great. But yes, in Crybaby, I understand that because I had Joey Heatherton, I had David Nelson from Ozzie and Harriet playing Tracy Lord's father, Patty Hearst, the mother. So I think I kind of had fun with that as doing it first, but I don't think I ever did it afterwards, really. I did it that one time. And since I thought people would expect that, I didn't do it again. The same reason after Divine Ate a Dog Turd, I never tried to top that. Because once you do something and it works, leave it alone. You did it once. So I'm trying to think what you could call stunt casting in any of the movies after Crybaby. Melanie Griffith wasn't stunt casting. She was a big star. Certainly, no, I don't know that I did do. And I'm not against stunt casting, but sometimes it just stops a movie. I think if you have a cameo and you're watching it in the story and then the cameo is somebody that's completely a movie star, it stops it to me. So I think it didn't stop it in Crybaby when every part was kind of like that almost.
Right. Hairspray at the time in 1988, was pretty progressive, I think, on some of the things you were tackling about race and dealing with that, even though that you were talking about things that happened 30, 25 years prior to when the film came out. So we have a question that says, you address race relations in an interesting way. What do you think about the Black Lives Matter movement? And do you ever plan to address that in your current work?
Well, I think I addressed it as much. Hairspray. It has gotten criticism saying it's a white savior picture. It is. I was Tracy when I lived in an upper middle class neighborhood in Baltimore, but we went downtown. We marched against George Wallace. I went to the black neighborhood, to the record store. All that stuff happened to me, really. But I understand that criticism, but that's all I can do as a white person. The Black Lives Matter. I'm friends with DeRay. He ran for mayor in Baltimore. I was one of his supporters. So if I was 19 years old, I'd be out there. I'd probably be Antifa. They're just cute. They look good. But at the same time, I don't want to get the virus. So I'm an old person now. But I think that I really salute the new kids that are out there because it's working better than it ever did. It seems like it's getting action really quicker, and it's got a huge diverse crowd of people. And I support them completely. At the same time, I think that it's exciting. It's change that's happening fast and working, and so I'm all for it completely. I'm just too old to riot.
The last few books, you mentioned the commencement speech you did, which was made into a great little book called Make Trouble.
I did a new one this year. Yeah,
oh, you did another?
Yeah, right in the middle of the pandemic. And that's the one where I said it was right before the Black Lives, with the big thing that happened. So basically I said, the only thing you can't do, if it goes back to the same old thing, it's your fault, because this generation is the one that has to not be the new normal. And they didn't. And that's just coincidental that I was lucky enough to give that speech right before all this happened. But they didn't go back to the new normal. They did something that no other generation has done. So that's pretty exciting. And what a drag it is to be the graduating class of a virus, And I did say in the speech, well, if it's the end of the world, at least you're the last graduating class. That's unique.
Yeah, totally. I loved the book about hitchhiking, by the way, and I've never hitchhiked, but I almost wanted to after reading it. So it was very motivational.
Nowadays, they don't hitchhiking. They don't even know what it is. They think that you're going to squeegee their window or something. They don't know what it is. I hitchhiked and been in a car where the little kid said, "Dad, why'd you pick that person up? Why is he in the car?" They don't know what it is. They've never even seen it in a movie. I've still done it a couple times. It works. I can really do it now.
One of my favorite road signs I saw not too long ago driving through rural Oklahoma was somewhat near a prison, and it was an actual, state-sanctioned road sign, green and white, and it said, "Please be aware of escaping inmates." Jesus,
me standing hitchhiking right underneath it.
Yeah.
I'd pick that person up. There's an edgy hitchhiker, right? If you see somebody running from a prison and putting their arm, I might balk, But I learned hitchhiking across the country that funny signs don't work. Everyone laughs, but hey, I'm not warming up an audience for Bill Maher. I want to ride. So it has to be, I had a sign that said, I'm not psycho. Everyone laughed, but never did anyone pick me up. It's more direct. You just have to say I-70 or somewhere that gives them not too long, because they think if you're too nuts, they don't want to have to be stuck with you for 2 days. So you have to put a sign on it that gives somebody a meaning. Well, if we pick him up, we can take him for this long. We'll see, but not too short, because local rides are your enemy if you're hitchhiking a long distance, because they let you off in the cities, which is the worst place to ever get a ride.
We had a guest email us a question earlier, and they actually sent along a picture, and it was a handbill about a event that you did here in Tulsa back in 1988, and it was kind of an evening with you where you were answering questions. And I wonder, back in those days, you're going on a book tour. Obviously, you would be on a book tour right now if there was no pandemic, but you've been kind of on the road and promoting your work for a long time. And obviously, not every director is going out on the road, kind of road showing with their films and stuff. Did you enjoy doing that, or was it just what you had to do to make the films be seen?
When I was in Tulsa that time, it wasn't just answering questions. I had a whole spoken word show I did even then. So I always did it. It started out in the beginning because New Line, who was my distributor for most of those movies, had a non-theatrical department, which was where the only place in most cities in America you could see my films at that time was at universities. It's completely not like that today. Universities show like big hit movies now. But so I learned to do it because in the beginning we wanted to get jobs. So people didn't know who it was. So I would come out with Divine. I'd say the most beautiful woman in the world, and Divine would come out and throw dead fish in the audience, and people didn't know what to do. Then we had a fake cop that would come in to try to arrest us, and Divine would strangle him, and then the show would start. So it was vaudeville. I grew up in Baltimore where they had the Block, which was all stripper and vaudeville and stuff, and we used to go there and watch the strippers and the comedians and stuff. So I learned how to do that kind of thing, that really, to get people's attention. We didn't have money for ads, so the only way we could get people's attention was to get publicity to do it. So then people would know about the films and come to see them. And then I learned it was a way to meet the audience and to stay in touch and to travel all over the world, basically for free. And at the same time, to keep seeing what people are like everywhere in the world, to really be in touch with it. So it became like a spoken word show that I still do, or did, until this virus happened.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. Funny, I'm looking at this. So for $10, this is when $10 you could get Hairspray, you in person for your show, Polyester, Female Trouble, and Pink Flamingos all in a row from 5:30. Yeah,
one night. Oh God, that's like a dusk to dawn show. That's when they used to say in the old days, "Get in free and pay to get out."
Yeah, good times. I'm curious, when you were kind of coming up in filmmaking, someone, Roger Corman is very famous for having kind of shepherded a lot of young filmmakers around the time you were kind of coming into your own. How is it that you guys kind of never really worked together?
We did meet. We were both the guest of honor at 2 different film festivals together. So I liked him and got along with him. And by that point, though, when he was making all those movies, he was maybe a decade older than me. So basically, when he was making all those movies, I was making like Mondo trash. I was more into underground movies and stuff. He was into exploitation movies. And I loved exploitation movies. And I certainly put together exploitation movies, foreign movies, and underground movies together to come up with the genre that I created. But he was very much into exploitation movies. I don't mean that badly. They were brilliant, some of them, and he would think up the ad campaign. I did that too. I used to think up the ad campaign first. I certainly learned stuff from the world of exploitation completely. We used to give door prizes of rotten hamburger meat and stuff. I mean, I always tried to be a showman in some way, and he was too.
Lisa asked the question, how did you meet the incredible Edith Massey?
I met Edith Massey through Vincent Perenio, who did all the production design for my movies, and Susan Lowe, who later played Mole in Desperate Living and was in in supporting characters in a lot of my movies. And they lived in Fells Point, which was at the time in Baltimore, the lowest rent, cheapest neighborhood. Now it's a very hip place to live and everything. But they were the first people that lived there. And they said, you got to meet this woman. She worked in Pete's Hotel, which was a wino bar that you can even see in Multiple Maniacs. The first scene I shoot with Edith, that was Pete's Hotel. That's where she worked, in that bar. So we started hanging out in there. Divine hated it because it was what they called then hobos, really, and drinks were 30 cents. And Edith was the barmaid who kind of mothered all the bums, really. And but she welcomed us, and it became our hangout. And so we used to hang out there. So I gave her that small part, basically playing herself in Multiple Maniacs. And the audience liked her so much that I knew that it was just like Hollywood. She clawed her way up because audiences liked her. And then I gave her the part in, as the egg lady in Pink Flamingos. And then she became, an underground star from that. Even Andy Warhol, when he met her, said, God, where'd you find her?
I love the idea of Edith Massey and Andy Warhol hanging out. That's a moment.
They met in Baltimore. She had no idea who he was, but she didn't care. She was nice to everybody. It could have been Jackie Kennedy or Jack the Ripper. She would have been just as nice to him.
So the way you have Mr. Know-It-All arranged, I wonder if it began, because you said you write every morning and you don't really know what form it will take. Did this?
I know what I'm gonna. I did a whole treatment for the whole book before I got the deal. I mean, I thought up the whole book before.
Okay, so this did not begin as kind of vignettes that you then put together at some point. You had kind of an overarching theme.
It was an over thing. It was supposed to be about every anecdote I had about Hollywood, how to get through it, about the art world, about architecture, about how to open a restaurant that would be so hideous that it would be the most successful restaurant, how to live in the most shocking, brutalist house. And at the end, I try to tell you how to beat death even. So I tried to cover every subject that I could think of. And that was the joke, Mr. Know-It-All. I have an opinion on everything. So it was certainly really all the knowledge that I could think of to pass down to the next generation. That's what I tried to do in this book.
If you guys don't have additional copies yet of Mr. Know-It-All, like I said, there's some links in our chat here, and John has been kind enough to sign book plates for all of you guys. So I encourage you to do that. So we'll keep posting that link in there. When the pandemic began, all these things were coming out, people trying to make lemonade from these lemons and saying, well, William Shakespeare wrote XYZ plays during the Black Plague, blah, 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 and he was so productive, and you're going to use this time to be productive. You said, you're constantly just creating all the time. So have you seen any uptick, or are you just kind of on the same basic schedule?
The same.
Yeah.
But a lot of writers I know, Edmund White told me that he said most of the writers he know are having a really hard time writing it. I don't know that I don't know if it's affected the quality of it. I don't know, but I still go in there every day and do it. But so that hasn't changed my life so much. So, but everything else has changed completely. I do think it's depressing some days, that you wake up and think, oh, this is still going on, and I don't really see an end. That's the weird part. So, but I'm an optimist, I think, who knows, I just keep going, but it hasn't really affected the writing so much, I don't think. But no, it hasn't frozen me. It hasn't made me so depressed that I can't write, thank God, yet.
I don't want to take us down too dark of a path here, but I'm curious to just hear what your thoughts on, having lived through so many different eras. You lived through the AIDS, HIV era, and I'm wondering if you see parallels between that period and now, and how you feel about kind of living through two plagues in a way.
Yeah, or more. I'll tell you the other plagues. All artistic communities go through plagues, and it's usually sexual, from everything about syphilis in the old days to suicide to drug overaddiction. Artists have always had problems. But it's weird because I only know 2 people that have died from the virus, and tragically, and they were young, they didn't have health issues. I know many people that have gotten it and have gotten over it, but I know a lot of people. And in AIDS, half my friends died. I knew hundreds of people that died. But I always said that in the Vietnam years, I know how to get out going in the Army, and so did my friends, right? So when I went down on that bus to the draft board that day, I knew I wasn't going there. And all the people that went to Vietnam, Many of them could have died, but I didn't know those people. And when AIDS happened, maybe the same people on that bus, they didn't know anybody that died of AIDS. So, and now I know so many people I know that have friends that are dying from ODing, from this opioid thing, which that's the new plague. So there's always a plague that strikes creative artists, and it strikes everybody, but it seems like it strikes harder in the artistic community. And this one maybe hasn't. Maybe it's just more everybody, you know. It's certainly, I think, more to people of color and all that. I keep reading scientifically, but I don't know as many people. I know way more people that have died of ODs, AIDS. So it's weird because you keep thinking, well, when's it gonna, you know, every day when you have, who doesn't wake up and think, I have it, oh my God, I coughed once. So the one thing that you have to remember is you don't always die when you get it. But when I was young, when you first heard of AIDS, you did die when you first got it in the beginning, in a week, it seemed like. So I've been through all those terrible things that you remember, and it's hard to keep them. The new ones coming along, and each time this one seems endless. It seems more boring. It seems more, and they're all scary, but certainly AIDS was the scariest to me, definitely.
I had the great privilege of seeing your museum show, Indecent Exposure, at the Baltimore Museum of Art, and we got a chance to talk about that as well. And it was just an amazingly fun and cool show, and it had so many. It was such a joyful experience too. I just, I really felt great coming out of it, and I laughed a lot. It also made me think a lot too. We have an art question here, which is, could you talk about how you met Cy Twombly and his influence on your work? Now, for those who may not know, Cy Twombly, one of the great contemporary artists of the last half of the 20th century, passed away only a few years ago. Maybe you could talk about him a bit.
I was a huge fan of Cy because his scribbles to me are the ones that makes every person that has contempt before investigation about art go crazy. They hate him. It makes them so angry when they see it. They think, my kid could do that. And I was like, well, stupid, he should have. You know, he invented it. So, and his work is to me the most powerful, the most free, and it does appeal. I taught a class of youngsters that were like 12 years old, and we did a Cy Twombly class. Not one of them questioned him and said, this is ridiculous. I said, okay, let's do a Cy Twombly painting. We turned off all the lights, they blindfolded themselves, and they scribbled, and they went crazy. They loved it so much. He spoke to it. Children understand contemporary art. And so I loved him so much, and I wrote about him and everything, and I met him because we were together on the jury of the Locarno Film Festival. And we got along, and you had to be careful about Cy. He didn't want to meet people. He was kind of protective about, and I just thought he was so smart and so funny. And right up to the end, his final work is so strong and so powerful. And he really defied everybody. You look at those early scribbles that he did. He gave them to everybody. They just threw them out. I mean, nobody could imagine that would. So I think he was radical and beautiful and smart. And it's about writing to me. He made bad handwriting pay off. So I think that was what was so great. So even I did a thing. He has a work called, I don't know, what's it called? Like all these letters that are scribbleable. I said, I can translate them. And I did a whole thing where I pretended I could read that writing. And I think he thought it was funny. I think he was generous to me, certainly. And he came to visit my house, and he was a lovely man that I was very privileged to know.
Our friend Steve here asked a question. He says, you did a hilarious turn as Ricky Lake's doctor in Hairspray. How did that come about? And do you wish you had made more cameos in your own films, a la Alfred Hitchcock?
No, I hated being in my own movies. I have to direct, and then I have to go to hair and makeup and do it. No, Rachel Talalay, the wonderful producer, worked with it, wanted me to do that cameo, so I did it. I never did it again. I don't mind being in other people's movies. I'd love to be in movies where you'd never expect me. I was in Alvin the Chipmunk's movie. I was in I was in the Woody Allen movie. I didn't give the money back. I was in, what else was I in recently? The Black Book. I was in Law and Order this year. So I like to do movies where people don't expect me. The same way I was the Nike ad this year. Who could imagine that? And now I'm the face for Yves Saint Laurent. I don't know if you've seen the new ad campaign, but who would have imagined this kind of stuff would happen? So to me, I'm having a good time satirizing the whole fame thing by getting jobs from it, which is kind of the last jobs you'd think I'd get. But being in my own movies, I don't think I'd ever do it again. I didn't enjoy that. I played William Castle in Fame, with the Ryan Murphy thing with Jessica Lange playing Joan Crawford. And so I enjoyed doing that kind of thing, things that you wouldn't really expect me to be in.
I mean, William Castle, I know, is a hero of yours and is, someone who just does not get enough credit, I think, even to this day.
I think he does. I think he does. I mean, even did you ever see Matinee, the whole movie, the fictitious movie they made about him? And I think he's pretty well respected, and many theaters have had festivals of his work where they even have people hiding under the chairs to grab your legs to try to do some of the gimmicks. And his daughter, who's lovely, she redid some of his movies that were hits again. And I wrote the introduction to his biography, his autobiography. So I think William Castle has a lot of respect still.
I mean, I guess we wouldn't have Odorama maybe if not for someone like him. It kind of owes a debt of gratitude.
I mean, a gimmick, and that could never happen today, because in those days they had to wire every one of those seats. They didn't do them all, but each seat had 3 wires that ran to another wire in the aisle going up. Imagine doing that today. That's because a movie opened first run in one theater, played downtown for 8 weeks, and that was it. There was no video. You never saw it again. So they had the time to do that in one theater in each city. Now it opens, it did open in 2,000 theaters. They're never going to do that. And it plays 3 weeks, and it's getting lesser and lesser how long it plays now.
We have a question, kind of a deep cut here about Desperate Living. So the question says, my favorite scene in any film you've ever done was the closing of Desperate Living. Mink Stoll is getting a gun shoved up her butt, and she says, you can't destroy the beauty of fascism with a single bullet. And this person says, I feel that scene has never rang more true than it does in today's social climate. What inspired that scene?
That scene, probably Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, inspired that scene, because that has a crazy ending with guns and everything. I'm not sure I would do that scene today, but Mink was very brave, and Mink is still a great, great friend of mine, and we've been friends for 50 years. And she still works all the time. She's funny. She's a great singer too. And so that scene, Desperate Living is my ugliest movie, definitely. And but some people like it the best. It's the most politically incorrect now, in a way too, probably. But it's one I look back on them all. They're like bad children that have gotten out of rehab, and they're doing okay today.
We've got a few minutes left. I'm curious to hear what you see. Obviously, we're living at such an unpredictable time. It's hard to plan anything, but books, of course, are still coming. So do you have any way, do you want to tease anything that we should be looking forward to in the next couple of years?
I think it's bad luck. I do have some things that maybe are going to come out, but I think it's bad luck to ever promote something before it's real, because I have to promote them afterwards for eternity. So I think I wait till it's really real to tell a story, but I've got a couple projects that I think are going to happen. So, I'm excited. I just keep going. And, like everybody, you're trying to get a new job different ways, like everybody's trying to do today. Everybody I know doesn't have a job anymore in show business, restaurants, everything I know, art world, it's all over kind of. So, and we don't know when it's going to come back. So, but that's not as bad as the people that do still have a job. It's the job where they have to be out in the most dangerous place dealing with people every day to deliver me toilet paper from Amazon. Those are the real brave people, obviously, and a lot of people say that, but it's true. They're the ones that are the heroes today. So I stopped ordering that stuff because I felt bad for people who had to deliver it.
Yeah, it does definitely make you feel like you're living in some kind of weird caste system of some kind.
Or just a grade D horror movie we're all trapped in, no matter where you live, kind of.
My last question is this: at the very beginning of our talk, you talked about watching the shows, and you mentioned you've been reading a ton. I'm curious, what you've loved reading recently, and also what are a few books that you always tell people to read that they might not be familiar with? Or do you have a few favorites that you always
Yeah, I do.
recommend?
And in Role Models, my book, I picked the five. It's certainly Jane Bowles' Two Serious Ladies is my favorite novel ever. I like Denton Welsh a lot. I love to read all his books. I'm a big fan of, oh God, you're catching me now. I have to say it. What is her name? The woman, the English woman that looked like the old maid card that wrote, oh, I'm going blank on her, but all right. So I do write about them. I think Denton Welsh and Jane Bowles would be two writers that I would really push that maybe you haven't read. But I still like to read. I'm a big fan of James Purdy, somebody else that I really like. I mean, of course, the obvious ones like Tennessee Williams. Jean Genet, are you kidding? He saved my life when I was in Catholic school and I read Our Lady of the Flowers. I thought, oh my God, reading is how you escape. Reading is how you get out of anything because you can go to a different world and learn and realize that you can reinvent yourself. So to me, reading has always saved my life. And I didn't like to read when I was young because the schools made me read such boring books when I was a kid. I didn't want to read Benjamin Franklin's life. I wanted to read Street Rod about juvenile delinquents. So I think that's the problem today is the kids, sometimes they're turned off by reading because they have to read such dull books. When Grove Press saved my life. When those books first came out in the 60s, Genet and all those kind of Marguerite Duras and all that stuff, that got me hooked on reading.
So we'll recap for people. Two Serious Ladies by Jane Bowles is on the list. We want to say something maybe narrow rooms.
In Youth is Pleasure by Denton Welsh. That's the other one I'd recommend of all his. And they're both in print, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, great. Well, I just have enjoyed the hell out of this. I hope you did too. It was such a pleasure to get to talk to you. And I'm
going to get to Tulsa again one day for real, not virtually.
Good. Well, we're thrilled you were able to do it. I want to say everyone who is watching, thank you for joining us. You're going to really enjoy Mr. Know-It-All if you haven't had a chance to read it yet. If you haven't gotten your signed book plate, please get in touch with us and we'll make sure you get that for your book. And stay safe. Thank you, John, again. I hope to see you in Tulsa soon. And take care, everybody. We'll see you very soon.
Thank you, everybody.